Hello, Rachel here. Welcome to my SlowTV Stitchery. So after much toing and froing, I am back to make progress. I still think it was worth thinking of and experimenting with the lighter colour for the little girls. But I'm not entirely surprised, I have to say, that it didn't work. It's an interesting discovery to make that in heraldry the metals are regarded almost as neutrals. They are other colours are happily put against them with no expectation that there will be a problem, and there isn't. It's always considered that any colour will stand out well against gold or silver, and that gold or silver will stand out well against any colour. And with that in my background, as it were, I've been slightly intrigued to discover just how challenging a background gold can be, and how much one needs to make allowances for the colour. Now, it may be that this particular shade of gold is challenging, but I have a feeling that it's not that. I have a feeling that it is a matter of perhaps the use of a different material that made it so much more difficult to see whether I could get that colour to work. However, I am now moving on, and as you can see, I've made it to the top border, which means that I'm in sight of a whole new range of interesting challenges. There will come a point where I have to decide what is going to be the outer boundary, how to do the top row, and then I will have a whole slew of going backwards and forwards in ever decreasing arcs until I get to the corner. However, that will merely be practice for all the other corners I will have to do, so It's not a bad thing. This one you will see, I think, is being a lot more challenging to do half tone than the other border. And that's just because of the different angle of the stitches, I think. As I said originally, I will no doubt be going back over this whole section, carefully filling in places that I feel need to be filled in. Now there will come a point, I think, when the arcs I am doing will be effectively only sections of arc running vertically, and I might then turn my frame at a different angle. We'll see. Had to put a cushion on my chair to raise myself higher so I can reach over to the top here and see what I'm doing. And that's meant bringing in a footstool, because with the extra height of the cushion my feet don't touch the ground. So this whole corner of the house is becoming ever more accessorized. However, you do what you need to do to make your working area work for you. When I'm not recording, I often use my floor standing magnifier with light rather than my clip-on magnifiers, just because it's slightly less visually disturbing. But when I'm recording, I haven't been able to find a way that I can see what I'm doing and you can see what I'm doing, because the magnifier gets in the way. Some of you have commented on the music I have on in the background. I've been trying to have it low enough not to distract too much, but it helps to differentiate filming from non-filming. When I'm not filming, I tend to have the radio on, but I decided after the first couple of episodes of this that being randomly interrupted when I was speaking by the radio speaking as well was just going to confuse all of us. And so it provides an early warning for my husband that I'm filming, and please sneak in very quietly. He came in a couple of days ago when I was working on this and said, oh no, I didn't think you were filming. It didn't sound like that sort of music. Looking at the radio, which was happily wittering away with Essential Classics or something. So it's working. I have a couple of playlists that I alter between. There's this one which is lute music, lutenists and other similar instruments. I think there's a theorbo in there occasionally as well, which I discovered some years ago going to a lecture where the musical elements were provided by the lutenist Jakob Lindberg. He introduced his lute and his theorbo, and then note that English is not his first language. He introduced us to his theorbo and then said, an anagram of which is the oh bother. And there was a pause while the entire audience went through the letters of theorbo and duly discovered that indeed it is an anagram of oh bother, and gurgled with laughter in unison, which was quite fun. Somebody else gave him that, or whether he got there on his own. I would place no bets against him. I think he's a Dane, and the Scandinavians are very good at languages by and large, and particularly at English. So that's one of the playlists. If people are desperate to know, I can email me and I'll tell you what the CDs are. There's another playlist which is pretty much entirely Bach. Starts off with the Goldberg variations played by a musician we actually know, called David Wright, and there's the cello suites played by another musician we know. Guys, if you go to concerts and the musicians have CDs on sale, buy one. They get next to nothing if the CDs are streamed on Spotify or associated channels. They don't get a great deal for any plays of the music, but the chances are, if they are selling CDs, that they get most of the profit on CDs that they sell at their events. So that's a good way to support them. And it gives you a chance to listen again. More than once I've found that something that I struggled to keep up with in the concert has, shall we say, grown on me on subsequent listenings. And when that hasn't happened, I've just been reminded of a happy hour or so in the company of some people whose diligence and talent I admire, and a whole load of other people who share my admiration for them. I do rather have my doubts about the line of Akhenaten's leg here. I'm going to leave it for now because it's one of those things that I think will be easier to assess truly when the whole thing is finished. And although, as I've said, you'd like to get it right first time, it is possible to add in stitches, as you can see. Although I must admit unpicking 3 times before you do so is not advised. But I do think that looking at this when it's finished will give me a much truer sense, and it will be really that much easier, I hope. We all know about plans. You don't have to be a mouse for your plans to gang ugly. Sorry, I believe the pronunciation is Agley. If anybody knows or would like to do a recording of themselves reciting that poem, do let me know. I am happy with the little sliver of gold. It wasn't until I was stitching that I looked hard enough at the steeling to really register that there was that gap and his feet were not stacked perfectly behind one another, but one slightly in advance of the other. It doesn't look an entirely comfortable pose. But it does have that sense of informality, while still being a nice design. I think perhaps that's the thing. Looking at it as a pattern of shapes and colours, it is quite pleasing, and that, I think, is something that the Egyptians did really understand, that when you're representing something in a form which is going to be static, which is going to be looked at, accuracy is not as important as having something which is pleasing to the eye and pleasing to the mind. So the patterns of shapes and colours have a pleasing rhythm to them. And if you look at ancient Egyptian art, you will see that, even if you have trouble interpreting what you can see, because so much has fallen off the wall or been rubbed off the floor or otherwise damaged by the passage of time. You can usually still see that there's a rhythm and a flow, and that's something that I'm trying to recreate. And of course, I think I was finding this with that hunting cat in felt work. It's actually quite tricky when you're using a technique as slow and painstaking as embroidery to produce the same sense of energy and flow that you can actually produce quite easily in painting, for example. I'm definitely going to have to add features to all of the characters. I could just about get away without giving Akhenaten features, I think. But this tangle of limbs on this side is going to need outlining to some degree, and it would be very odd looking if, having outlined a leg or two, I didn't then give them eyes. Anyone who's tried painting a portrait will know that you only have to get features wrong by a hairbreadth, and an ordinary expression becomes an absolutely terrifying squint, or a glare, or something else which you don't really want to encounter, whether the night is dark or not. So I'll have to think of something. That's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed following along. Happy stitching!